myself with my dear sister, Dr. Akhtar. And the first question is, can I get COVID from this vaccine?
It's a great question, Rolanda. Lisa, I'm sorry, and I appreciate it. So when we think about the mechanism of these vaccines, and there's different ways that vaccines work, but this is probably one of the safest ways that vaccines work. We actually take the genetic material of one small part of the virus itself. It's a spike protein that's on the surface of the virus, and that's what binds to the cell in our body, allowing the virus to fuse with the cell in our body. And so what the vaccine is putting into our body is just the genetic material to make that one protein. That's it. The virus has thousands of proteins in it, but this is only making one protein, so the body can make antibodies to that one protein, preventing that binding process. So it's absolutely impossible to get COVID from the vaccine. It only allows you to make one of thousands of proteins that are involved in the virus itself.
Great, thanks. So no. No. Is there a cost to this vaccine? I mean, do I have to have health insurance in order to get it?
Absolutely not. So the vaccine itself is given to us, or given to everybody free of cost by the government. There is sometimes some places that will charge your health insurance to administer the vaccination, but here at Penn Medicine and Chester County Hospital, we do not charge for the cost of administration. The health department similarly will not charge you for the cost of administration. So for the vast majority of us, it should be a free vaccination.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chester County Hospital, for going that administration fee. Thank you. So, how can I be sure the vaccine is safe with it being developed so quickly?
It's a great question. And so we certainly have seen a record and really remarkable and inspiring scientific story here. That being said, I have to say that this is not the first time we've had an mRNA vaccine. We've had an mRNA vaccine for influenza. We've had an mRNA vaccine for dengue. Neither of them were widely used because we really didn't need to. But the truth is that the science behind mRNA vaccines have been present for at least 10 years. I trained at Penn all through my medical training, and Drew Weissman, who is the leader in this technology, was coming to talk to us as medical students about the technology. So yes, it's been developed in record time because the technology was there and ready to go, which is wonderful. We got really lucky. Somebody was looking over us, and that was a big part of it too. Nobody knew how lucky we would get. And the third thing is that a lot of the time taken in vaccine development is to save money. So big gaps of time between phase 1 and phase 2. And then finally after phase 3, then when it starts working, they start developing and building up the stores. In this situation, they started building up the stores when they first developed the vaccine. So there's going to be plenty of vaccines, we think, that they are going to have wasted a lot of money. All of that fat was cut off the process. So the really important steps of it were done just the same way that they would have been done for any other vaccine.
Yeah, great, thank you. Thank you. So what are the side effects of the vaccine? And have there been reported serious adverse reactions or complications related to the vaccine?
So this is where Rolanda and I agree, right, Rolanda?
Yes, we do.
That there is a very big difference between a side effect and an adverse reaction. A side effect is something you expect, right? You know, I take Ambien and I'm sleepy the next day, right? It's an expected effect. It's not pleasant necessarily, but it's expected. The pain in your arm, the fever the next day, the muscle aches and pains, the headaches, the fatigue, those can all be expected side effects. That's your immune system fighting hard. And in fact, I've said this so much that I have employees here at the hospital who are upset that they don't have that effect after they receive the vaccine. So it's a good thing. It's your body fighting. That's a side effect. Adverse reactions are unexpected and not part of that expected profile. And so the most common adverse effect that we've seen from this vaccine have been the few cases of allergic reactions that we've all heard about. There was a recent publication that came out from the CDC that showed the rate is 11 cases per million doses. It's pretty darn impressive, isn't it, guys? I'd take that. And as Dr. Shireen Mark, who's our cardiologist, can tell you, we give people lisinopril all the time. I don't know if any of you have been on it, but that rate of anaphylaxis is 1 in 100.
That's right.
Versus 11
That's right.
in a million.
Wow.
So yes, there are adverse reactions, the most common being a severe allergic reaction. But I'll tell you something, guys. Not a single person has died from the vaccine. We've now had hundreds of thousands of doses administered. Not a single person has died from the vaccine. And we lose people every day to COVID. Every day, thousands of people who should not be where they are.
Great, great. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. Not one person has died from administering the vaccine, but many people are dying every day. So, doctor, we've talked about the side effects, the adverse reactions, right? But I'm asking you to make the difference between the vaccine reaction, side effects, adverse reactions, and the signs of COVID. Because in our communities, we're hearing, oh my goodness, she had this symptom and they have COVID. So if you can go over the signs of COVID a little bit clearer, we appreciate that.
Sure. Many people will think that the side effects of the vaccine, the fever, the fatigue, the muscle aches and pains sound like COVID. Is it giving me COVID? It's a totally legitimate question. But remember, COVID is, and those are immune system, and part of COVID is the immune system as well. So that's why there's some non-specific overlap. Lots of things cause headaches and fatigue, right? It's not just the vaccine or COVID. What's different with COVID is really the respiratory symptoms. The vaccine should never and never does cause shortness of breath. It should not cause loss of smell and taste. Those are really important things. It shouldn't cause a severe cough. It shouldn't cause respiratory distress. So the vaccine has these non-specific immune-fighting things, but COVID is a disease of many things, but the most prominent being your lungs and your respiratory tract. We should never see that with the vaccine.
Great, great. Thank you. That's very important. Thank you. If you had a severe allergic reaction in the past and have had to use an EpiPen, should you receive the vaccine in a medical facility?
It's a great question. It depends on what your reaction was to. If it was to food, if it was to a bee sting, if it was to an animal, you do not need any further monitoring than usual. And remember, why are we all here today? To speak to you, but also Dr. Pinsky was smart enough to put in an observation period, so she's over there observing all of you. So in addition to, exactly, she's a great observer. On our first day of vaccination, I was administering and she was observing. So everyone who gets a vaccine is observed for at least 15 minutes. If you've had a severe allergic reaction to an injectable, so not just an oral medication, but an injectable medication, you're absolutely allowed to get the vaccine. We just observe you for 30 minutes. So if you've had a reaction to an injectable that requires an EpiPen, I think, my opinion, is that you should probably get it in a more monitored setting, like hospital versus a CVS where you wait in your car. Although 11 in a million, maybe I'm being conservative, you know. But I do think it makes sense, and we'll just observe you a little bit longer. We've been really lucky and blessed that nobody in this facility has had an allergic reaction so far.
That's great. And we talked about 20,000 vaccines have already been administered and no one here at Chester County Hospital. Those are really good facts, and we're excited about that. If one has previously been diagnosed with COVID, can they still receive the vaccine?
We get that question often, and it's a great question. We know that many people in the trials, 10% of people in the trials actually it's more like 5% of people in the trials actually had evidence of prior COVID infection when they got the vaccine, and they did not have any adverse reaction. So the first answer is you're not going to have any harm to getting the vaccine if you've had COVID, right? So you have COVID, you get the vaccine, no problem. You're not going to have a problem with that. The second thing is we know that COVID gives protective immunity, protects you from reinfection for at least 6 months, probably even longer than that. There's really good data out there that suggests the vaccine may actually protect you longer than natural infection, especially if you've had very mild natural infection. So yes, there's no harm to getting the COVID vaccine, even if you know you've had COVID, or if you don't know you've had COVID, completely safe. And there may actually be a benefit to it in that your protective immunity, the time period that you're not going to get reinfected, will probably be longer with vaccine than with natural infection.
Great, thank you. Oh, Dr. Johnson, you've been patiently waiting over there. So, does the vaccine affect African Americans differently?
So that's a good question. It's a huge concern in our community. With these experiments and these trials, the goal is to have a diverse representation in the number of the participants who are participating in these trials and studies. So with this particular vaccine, although it wasn't quite ideal, there were more people of black and brown color who were participants in the trials. And based on the data from these trials, it did not appear to be any difference in safety or the efficacy of the vaccine in African Americans compared to other participants who were of different races in the trial.
Great. How can I trust what the experts are saying about the vaccine, taking into consideration the tainted history between the medical community and the African American community, specifically addressing the Tuskegee experiment and the whole situation around Henrietta Lacks?
Right. So I think that's been the biggest issue in terms of vaccine hesitancy with the general population, but specifically in the African American community. It is really important to validate and to be cognizant of the apprehensions and the fears that we have as an African American community with the medical establishment. With the Tuskegee experiment, with people treatment being withheld from those individuals, with the Henrietta Lacks story where consent was not obtained to get her cells, there is reasons why we have mistrust in this in the medical establishment. I think the medical establishment has recognized our fears and apprehensions and has tried to address those in the terms of trying to establish review boards that are involved in research. The institutional review board is involved in making sure that research is conducted ethically, fairly, looking at the protocols of the trials and the experiments. And the other thing is there are African Americans who are in leadership position in some of these boards who are, part of the safeguard and part of the oversight of these vaccination trials. I also think one really important thing is looking at people who you trust. So trusted messengers, trusted advisors, whether it be your healthcare provider, whether it be someone who you know who's in the medical community or in the health field, our community leaders being involved. And I think that's one of the purposes of doing this today, is so that we can try to get the facts out, to try to dispel some of this misinformation that's going around, kind of debunk the myths that we're hearing, especially within our community. I think our goal, as we've talked before, is to try to make sure that people have the facts so that we can make informed decisions about the vaccine. And I think that's really important. So I think using those resources, talking to those people, also looking on your own, trying to get information on your own about the vaccine. So you're not just trusting what people are saying, but you're doing it yourself, you're listening to your trusted advisors. And also to Dr. Akhtar's point, in terms of one of the main scientists involved in the development of the mRNA technology was Kizzy Corbett. She was an African American research scientist who was phenomenal. So there are people within our community who have been involved in the development of the vaccine, as well as the oversight of the vaccine trials as well. So hopefully that will kind of help instill the trust that we need in terms of the vaccine.
It motivates me a great deal to see people who look like us, looking at the data, making the decisions. And I just found out today as I was driving in that the dean of the Harvard School of Public Health is a black woman, you know, and she's inspiring. I mean, she's incredible, and I urge you to look her up. And you know, when I hear, I mean, I look at the data myself, but when I hear words from people like her, it means something to me. And you know, and as we talk about the African American community, I should tell you, it's the same thing in immigrant communities. It's the same amount of distrust. It's the same amount of suspicion, and not trusting and not believing a group that's invariably looked down on us and made us feel like outsiders as well. So.
Great. That's very important. And I guess plainly speaking, we have a seat at the table. And it's a difference today when in the past, people that look like us didn't have a seat at that table and didn't have a voice. But today, with this vaccine, from the beginning until this very present time, we have had a seat and our voices have been heard. So that's important.
Yes.
Thank you so much, ladies. How can I be sure, as an African American, that I am not getting a different vaccine than others?
Yes. Well, that again goes into the trust or the mistrust that we have in the community. So the vaccines are produced and are distributed directly from the facilities to the states, where they are then distributed to local organizations. So the way the vaccines come in what we call a multi-dose vial. So that means that there are multiple doses in one single vial. So for example, the Pfizer vaccine has approximately 6 doses in one vial, and the Moderna vaccine has approximately 10 doses in one vial. So if we have 10 people lined up to get the vaccine, and we're all getting it from that same vial, each person, no matter who you are or what you look like, is getting the same vaccine from that same vial. So yes, again, I understand the apprehension and the fears, but that's the way that the vaccine is given and will continue to be given. And things may change as other vaccines become available, but as of right now, that's what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, and we just learned today that any given day here at Chester County Hospital, over 300 people are being vaccinated. So think about it. When you have these nurse administrators, they're not checking different vials. It's just a kind of a line. You get an injection and you're out the door. So it's that same vial, 10, discard, 10, discard, right?
Yep.
In fact, pharmacy draws up the little things. I mean, we're not even sophisticated enough to do that. Our pharmacist draws up the different needles and puts them in a batch, and we just grab what's in the batch and, you know, and administer it to who's next.
Yes.
Right. Yep. Great. Dr. Johnson.
Yes, ma'am.
Realizing that the minority and underserved communities have a higher burden of COVID and higher mortality from the disease, is the vaccine being distributed equitably?
Excellent question. I think from the beginning of the development of the vaccine, that has been a concern of whether the vaccine will be distributed fairly. And I know there's been a concerted effort to try to make sure that that occurs. I have been to different webinars and talks where they have talked about how to make sure the vaccine gets to those who are at the highest risk or who need it the most. So with that being said, the CDC has put out guidelines and recommendations based on trying to get the vaccine out to those at highest risk initially using a phased approach. And then the states, each state individually adopts that those guidelines and kind of tailors it to their own needs. So the goal is to try to vaccinate those who are at the highest risk, whether it's based on your occupation, like healthcare workers, whether it's based on your age, 75 years or older, or based on if you have underlying medical conditions. That is the goal. And hopefully those within the underserved and minority communities who fall into those categories will receive their vaccines at the time when they're supposed to, in a timely manner, so that those who are at higher risk will be vaccinated. Now, that's the goal, and that's what everybody would like, but the reality is, will it be implemented in that fashion? So we have to continue to monitor and look at the data, see how the vaccine is being distributed, who is getting it. Like you had mentioned, that 70% of the people who were vaccinated were of white race, and only 30% of African Americans. Part of the reason may be the mistrust that we have in terms of getting the vaccine. But regardless of the reason, there are different organizations who are really trying to monitor the distribution of the vaccine. There are faith-based organizations that are starting to develop initiatives to look at how the vaccine is being monitored. There's the Black Women's Health Initiative as well that's also looking at seeing how the vaccine is being distributed. And so we need people and organizations who are at the seat, at the table, who can look at the data and be a voice and advocate, so that if we need to pivot or make changes in how the vaccine is distributed, that can occur. So I think that's important for us to realize. We have to, with all this, we have to stay on top of it. We have to continue to monitor. We have to reassess. We have to reevaluate and make the necessary changes. But the goal is to try to get those at highest risk to be vaccinated. And that should include the minority and underserved communities, because we are bearing the brunt of this COVID virus.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that, Dr. Johnson. Dr. Akhtar. Is there a difference between Pfizer and Moderna vaccines? And can I choose which one I receive?
So both Pfizer and Moderna are mRNA vaccines that we talked about. The difference is really that if you just injected mRNA into your arm, the body would immediately destroy the molecule. The molecule itself is very sensitive to temperature. It's a finicky molecule. So what they've done to make it more stable is coat it with what's called a lipid nanoparticle layer. Basically like a little layer of fat that goes around it. The most common one is used as polyethylene glycol. Believe it or not, the same thing that we drink, Miralax, when you have constipation. So it's one of the main components of the vaccine, the nanoparticle layer. The difference between the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines is this nanoparticle layer. That's the difference, and that's why there are slightly different temperatures that they can be stored at. Moderna is a little bit more stable than the Pfizer vaccine, and that's the big difference. Can you get a choice? You know, the vaccines are really, really similar. When we've looked at efficacy, when we've looked at side effect profile, it's really been interchangeable in terms of how they work. They're not exactly interchangeable. At this point where we are in the distribution, we give what we give, and we give everything that we have. So I would say it would be hard to have a choice, to be completely honest with you guys, and not really necessary from my perspective as a scientist.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. And all of us today, we had Moderna, so we're okay with what we received today.
Can I also add this? The other thing is that the difference is between the interval between the first and second dose of the two vaccines. So if you get the Pfizer vaccine, you get your second dose 21 days afterwards, and if you get the Moderna vaccine, it's 28 days afterwards.
Yep, yep, thank you. Yep. Is it okay for me to get the Pfizer vaccine for my first injection and then receive the Moderna vaccine for my second?
The answer is no. And it's not because we don't know if it doesn't work. The fact is that's not how the trials were done. So let's stick to the nature of the trials, get the best bang for our buck, in other words, and that 95% efficacy was shown using the two vaccines in that time period. Does it really matter what the time period is? The answer is we don't know. We don't know. The studies are all coming, right? But the fact is that's how they were studied. That's how they were the most effective. So let's stick to that until we have more data.
That's right. Yep. So I'll see all of you guys here in 28 days for the Moderna second injection, right? Is one vaccine more effective for certain comorbidities than others?
We have not seen a difference, really. I mean, the vaccines have behaved very similarly, which makes sense given that they're the mRNA basis, right? So we've really not seen a big difference. There's some discussion on whether or not, I'm sure you guys have listened to the news, that the Pfizer may be protective against the variant from the UK. And that's just because there was a small study that looked at it. There has been no study that's been published yet that looked at Moderna. But all of us in the scientific community believe that Moderna and Pfizer will both be protective against the variant, and that both will be at least somewhat protective against asymptomatic spread. But again, the data is pending at this time.
Great. How soon after both vaccines can I expect partial or total immunity from COVID?
Yeah. So it's really 1 week is what people have most often looked at. Although when you looked at antibody levels, it took about 12 days to reach its maximum. So between 1 and 2 weeks, I would say.
After the second dose?
After the second dose. After your first dose, it takes longer because remember, you've never seen this before unless you've had COVID, but you've never seen it before, in which case it takes 2 weeks to get only 50% efficacy. So don't relax after your first dose, guys. We've had a few employees who got their vaccine and said, well, that's it. I'm safe. Not yet. Hang in there for a little bit longer. It's worth it.
That's right. That's right. Will the vaccine be less effective if I get the second dose after the recommended days?
The truth is we don't know, right? The answer is probably not. It'll probably be just as effective, but we haven't done the studies, so I wouldn't take the chance. If for some reason you can't get the second dose at the recommended time point, you physically can't be here, God forbid you get COVID and you're in your quarantine period, we do recommend you still get your second dose as close to that recommended period as possible. So if you have to wait till 31 days, go on and get your dose as soon as you can.
Great. Yes. How frequently will I need to be vaccinated? One time? Annually?
That's another one where we don't know the answer. Yeah, exactly.
So much unknown.
So much unknown.
That's right.
When we looked at the SARS-1 vaccine, which was the disease that was in Hong Kong in 2001, immunity lasted about 18 months. Most of us think that this will give multiple years of protection, but again, there's really no way of knowing. Do I think it's going to be lifelong like the measles vaccine? Probably not. In all likelihood, you are going to need a booster at some point. And that's why it's important for us to make sure you're safe and you tolerate it well this time, especially after your second dose. And you guys, I do have to tell you that after the second dose, your immune system's happy, right? And so, Dr. Pinsky here is our Energizer bunny. And you want to tell us what happened, Karen?
Slept for 18 hours.
Yeah, 18 hours, which for me is like 7 days straight, like literally, yeah, exactly. So, and I definitely had a sore arm and neck, but I was like, hey, my immune system fighting. So second dose, lay low for a few days, take it easy, it goes away.
Great, great. Knowledge is power, right?
Yes.
No surprises.
No
Yes.
surprises.
Dr. Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
were politics involved in the development of this vaccine?
Well, unfortunately, the COVID pandemic has been politicized from the very beginning. So, yes, there is, definite reason to have concern if politics were involved in this. But what I want people to understand and realize, this is a huge national issue, a national problem, and the urgency which you have to try to find a resolution to this problem has required that we needed a coordinated, all hands on deck effort to try to come up with this vaccine. So yes, there was federal funding given to some pharmaceutical companies to try to assist in the expedite the development and the production of the vaccine. But there were different departments involved, people from both sides of the aisle. Everybody was there. There are independent review boards to look at the trial results to make sure that it is safe and that it's efficacious. So it may have the appearance that corners were cut, that things weren't done, but like Dr. Akhtar alluded to, I think we became more efficient in the way that the vaccine was developed and rolled out in terms of cutting out those not cutting out the intermediate steps, but kind of doing things simultaneously so that we can be more efficient and quicken the rollout of the vaccine. Again, like I said before, we have to continue to be on top of it, to continue to monitor how things are going. We as African Americans need to be kind of active participants in this whole vaccine process. So reporting your reactions and your side effects to your healthcare provider or to the organization or location where you have the vaccine, so that can be reported in the monitoring system that we have. There's a system called the Vaccine Adverse Reporting System that is used to monitor the side effects. So that data can be evaluated and can be assessed. So again, we need to see, is something going on that needs to be addressed? Does something need to be changed based on the data that we're seeing? The vaccine is so young. It's only been out for 2 months. And like we say, a lot of things we just don't know, and we're not going to know until more data comes along. So if we participate in this whole process, we will be represented in that data so that things can be changed that will benefit us because we are part of the process. We are part of that data.
That's right. That's right. What is the best way to find out the most up-to-date information about the vaccine and its distribution?
So the best way is really looking, because it's such a state county thing, is trying to look at those different websites. So looking at the Pennsylvania Health Department website, looking at the Chester County Health Department website, looking at the Bucks County or Montgomery County Health Department website. Our goal is to try to, at the end of this video, to provide different resources of area of where you can go to look for information. If you don't have internet access, to have phone numbers that you can call to find out that information. So I think part of making sure that this vaccine is accessible to our community does not only involve, physically getting the vaccine to people, but also making sure that they know where to go to find out the information. So having an effective communication plan to get to our community so that the vaccine is accessible. So looking at those sites is really the best way to try to get the most up-to-date information.
Great, thank you. And also, our church, St. Paul's Baptist Church of Westchester, we have a relaunch task force website, and on our website we have up-to-date information that is reviewed weekly and updated accordingly, and it will either refer you to the CDC website or state public health website, but that's available to you online. Dr. Akhtar, what is Chester County's hospital's plan for administering the vaccine as we proceed through the various phases? But before you answer that question, would you tell us a little bit more about the specific phases that we're in currently and what phases are to come?
Sure. They are. There's amazing flexibility. Unfortunately, as you guys know, we have not had a great coordinated national response to this, right? And so, when Dr. Johnson talks about looking at this health department and that health department, it's because everybody's doing everything a little bit differently. And so I think the power that we have is as a group and looking, well, I heard something from this one, let everybody know. We're looking for a vaccine for my mother who's 71 and diabetic, and we're doing the same things you all are, looking at this health department, looking at my sister's in DC looking, so we're all kind of unfortunately having to do our own homework in this. The various phases that the CDC designated started with 1A, 1B, 1C, and then 2, which is basically everybody else. 1A is what we consider to be patient-facing activities, so frontline healthcare workers, people who are in long-term care facilities, or those who serve any sort of patient-facing or public-facing type of role in terms of patient care. 1B would be other frontline providers or personnel, so police, firefighters, grocery store clerks, teachers, all sorts of people who interact with a great deal of people every day. And then 1C would be comorbidities, age, things like that come in. And so that's a general platform. I'll tell you, some groups use 75, others use 65. The comorbidities are a little different from group to group, so there's just been a whole amount of variability about this, which makes me a little bit uncomfortable. It would be nice if we had more of a coordinated response. In terms of our role here, we're constantly evolving and shifting, but with the directive of the health department, we've really been restricting ourselves to 1A. And as you can probably hear from talking to others, we've been very expansive for what we consider 1A. It's a large group of people that we've been vaccinating, and really very early on reaching out beyond not only our own employees and Penn employees, we were probably one of the first, if not the first hospital in the UPHS health system that reached out to community providers of all types, right? So dentists, we're doing veterinarians, we're doing all kinds of, wide range of roles and responsibilities that we concur are 1A. And it's not just, obviously not just the doctors or nurses in the office, it's anybody who works in the office. We've been very, very clear about that. Whether or not you're the person checking in, cleaning the floors, checking the person out, taking the vital signs, you're just as eligible for the vaccine as a physician going in there. And that's been very, very important to us to make sure, because the truth is that our communities are going to be the ones less likely to be the one doctor, but be the one checking the person in, taking the vital signs, checking them out, cleaning the floors, and doing the essential business of keeping the place running as much as the doctor or the nurse would.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank
Of course,
you.
yeah.
And we thank Chester County Hospital for reaching out to the community and its commitment to the community, because I myself was personally cold called by Dr. Karen Pinsky, who actually put this into works and work with me and St. Paul's Baptist Church of Westchester to have this program set today. And so we thank Chester County and the commitment to the community. So as we come to the end of our time together, bidding is so sweet. I have one final question for my sisters. As women of color, growing up in America, based on your experiences, your feelings, what specifically persuaded you to accept this vaccine? Now, we know that you're physicians. I'm a physician too. But again, I had some hesitancy at the beginning of all of this. But what persuaded you specifically to receive the vaccine?
Well, for me, like you said,
I'm going to start with
I'm sorry.
Dr.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
And then we're going to lead.
I'm sorry.
We're going to lead with you, Dr.
Okay.
And it was my fault because I was
You're
looking at you. Dr. Agner.
I think my experiences have been always swayed by the color of my skin and my gender, right? So, as I've told people, it's the rare room I go into where the patient who's not on the phone says, the doctor is here. It's someone's here. The nurse is here. The phlebotomist is here. The pharmacist, anyone but the doctor. I can maybe count 3 instances in my 10 years of practice where someone said, let me get off the phone, the doctor is here.
Yeah.
Right? So, of course, it affects how you think and feel about the world and how you're being treated. It was a deeply personal decision, as I feel like this has to be for all of us. I have to believe the data because I have to look at it myself. And if I believe in the safety and efficacy of something, and I can be in a position where maybe I can even sway one person to say, you know what, she doesn't usually lie to me. In fact, a little too honest is usually what I hear from everyone. And she believes it and has taken it. And it'll convince even one person. It's important to me. I'm personally not afraid of COVID. And maybe it was because I grew up, I was 5 when I left Bangladesh. And multiple members of our family had died from infectious diseases. It's what happens, people die from, had aunts and uncles on both sides of my family died from malaria and tuberculosis. And it's very philosophical for us. Oh, another season of dengue is coming on. Chikungunya is coming. So it was never that much of a personal fear for me. But I think if I can look around and I can show one person who is on our environmental services who says, well, you know what, she's kind of out there talking about COVID and she believes it, then maybe I'll do it. And that was a personally important thing for me. more important, I think, than the personal protection, because I know how to be careful and I know how to be safe around patients with COVID. They're people and they don't scare me any more than anybody else scares me. That's been important too for me, is that I can go in a room and sit and hold the hand of someone with COVID and really not be afraid of getting it. But I think more that maybe if I could sway one heart and one mind by saying, I got it, absolutely. In fact, that was the first question Dr. Croft asked me when we started talking last week. She said, did you get the vaccine? And I think it would have been very different if I had said, no, I haven't. That was important to me.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Thank you so much for that, Doctor. Thank you. Dr. Johnson, same question.
Again, my experience within the medical community as an African American, as a female, similar experiences, not being recognized as the physician. Are you too young? Or how could you be? I've never seen an African American physician before. Seeing the health disparities that are within the healthcare system. I mean, let's be honest. I think COVID has kind of just highlighted what has already existed in terms of the health disparities that we see along racial lines, along social economic lines. So seeing all that, feeling all that, and it was personal for me because losing people, I lost a high school classmate who 1 week before I spoke to her and she was joking, I had a sore throat, these allergies are killing me. And the following Monday, she was gone. Seeing my colleagues who are working in the ICUs, seeing, people who are just dying, they're like, you go from one code to the next code to the next code to the next code. And if you've ever been involved in a code, it is awful. It is physically and emotionally draining. And so with all of that, I was hesitant. Even with all that, I was still hesitant. Even being in the medical profession, I had the same fears that we all have. I wanted to look at the data myself. I wanted to talk to people who knew more about the vaccine than I did. Like I said, I attended webinars where Dr. Fauci was on it to try to get his perspective. Speaking to people who have already received the vaccine. I wanted to try to get as much information as possible so that I can make, an informed decision based on the data, based on what was being shown. And from the data, from what we have so far, it did appear to be safe and efficacious. And I wanted to spread the word, like Dr. Akhtar said, to try to get as many people, if 1, if 2, if 3, if 10, to try to understand the impact the vaccine has had specifically on our community, give them a human perspective of it, and hopefully, me getting the vaccine will, just be that piece of light that they see to say, okay, if she's getting it, if other people's getting it, if she's spoken to other people who have gotten it or spoken to people within the community, that, I can get it as well. So I think it's really important for us to realize that this vaccine really can have an impact on how COVID is affecting our community. And it's so important. I want people to make an informed decision for themselves, but I do want them to make it based upon facts and that this really can make a difference.
That's right. That's right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, we're coming to the end of our time together. And the same question that I posed, my dear sisters, I posed to myself. And this is what I came up with. As the youngest of 4 children growing up in the projects of South Philadelphia and being blessed to go to college and medical school and having seen all of these disparities in healthcare growing up, I had some real misgivings about this particular vaccine. But what I did is, in all of my learning, I found that knowledge is power, and it empowers us. And what I did is I began to search for the facts. And the facts told me that yes, the base of this entire vaccine really came from the basis of a vaccine that has been out there for a decade or so. And so it's been used, and it has been proven to be efficacious. And then I looked at how the studies were being performed. and how this study really used over 30,000 or so people in phase 3 trials, which is a very large study. But even more important for me was that that study included a very diverse group of people. People who look like me, people who were male, female, different areas and walks of life, different demographics, and that was important. And not only that, when you have people looking at the data, there was no person looking at the data that had a personal benefit from it. They had third-party people looking at it that had no financial interest in it getting out, and that's important. You want to make sure that people are objectively looking at the data. And then they got all this data together, and then they transparently, openly, and willingly shared it. If you want to go and look at the data, it's out there for you to look at. And I encourage everyone to do so. And it is my earnest prayer that everyone takes an independent, self-reflective look as to why they should get this vaccine. For this vaccine is indeed the first step in all of us getting back to some sense of normalcy. And it's going to take your independent decision, whatever it may be. I pray that this time together has inspired you, motivated you, enlightened you to get the vaccine, and if not get it, to dig deeper, so that when you make that decision, it's a decision that is based on facts, not fear. And that is how we're going to move forward from where we are today. So it is indeed my pleasure. It has been a great time spending this morning with you all, and I pray that today, as we continue to celebrate the birthday of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., that we do something not only for ourselves, but for our community. Thank you so much, Penn Medicine, Chester County Hospital, for giving us the opportunity and the resources to do so. We thank St. Paul's Baptist Church here in Westchester, who is the Reverend Dr. Wayne E. Croft Sr. is our pastor, and the Relaunch Team Task Force who brought this program together. And with that, we say good day, and may God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good job.
And so you're getting Moderna today. When you come back next month, you're going to get Moderna as well.
Okay.
All right. Arm might be sore, low-grade fever, normal responses from when we get a vaccine.
Okay.
Tylenol is needed. Move your arm.
Okay.
And we don't wear gloves because we use hand sanitizer, so the
Okay.
CDC doesn't want us to waste PPE.
Okay.
And that's all I have for you.
All right. Great. Thank you. And what's your name? Oh,
Catherine.
Catherine. Thank you, Catherine. Yay! I'm so excited.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I'm like excited. Really excited. This is awesome.
I hate to break to you that getting the actual shot is the least climactic part of this whole process.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. A little teeny tiny shot and you won't even notice it.
Okay.
That is it.
That's it?
That's it.
Holy cow. I can't wait to tell my family. They are making such a big deal about this.
Are some of them not convinced?
They're not convinced. They just worried that it was rushed. And I said, well, the government backed it, so the pharmaceutical companies didn't have to worry about all that funding that they have to come up with. So it's great. Awesome.
And
That's
you
it.
say you're a teacher?
I am a teacher, yeah.
So
I
how
teach
does this
fourth grade.
Make you feel about teaching?
It makes me feel a lot more comfortable because my students are still traveling, going places with their family, meeting with families, and it makes me feel a lot better because now that they can come, when they come into the classroom, I'm not like really very anxious. I mean, I still will continue to be safe and do what I need to do for the next couple of weeks until I get the second shot, and then 2 weeks after that. But this makes me feel a lot better. I can rest a little easier at night.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited. All right. Thank you. That's perfect. Thank you.
I'm feeling great. I am so excited about receiving the vaccine. And I know the importance of the vaccine, particularly to African Americans, because they suffer. There's been suffering from this COVID, more so than any other population. So if I can be an example for them, I want to do it.
Is there some ambivalence in the African American community about the vaccine?
There's great amount of ambivalence because of past history, but you know, I know that this vaccine has been extensively studied, and I believe in its safety, I believe in its efficacy, so I want to show them that they should not be fearful of taking this vaccine.
So when I said, did you see what I said the order? Did you see it? I did see it.
That's it? Thank you so much. My pleasure. And I appreciate all that you guys are doing. Thank you.
I'm feeling amazing today. The fact that it's Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday and we're celebrating and we are making a difference, particularly to the African American community, showing that it's okay to get it. It's advised to get it, so I'm feeling good.
What would you tell people in your community about the vaccine?
That it is, number one, safe. It was designed with us in mind, with a very, very diverse group of participants during the clinical trials, and that it's the first step towards getting back to some sense of normalcy. And so I'm ready to do it, and I'm ready to be that example if I can. I'm honored to be the example.
Thank you, and congratulations.
Thank you.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
That was great. I didn't feel it.
You have any friends that are going to be jealous?
No, because through the power of persuading, all of my friends are getting it, so they won't be jealous. We'll be doing it together.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to give you this card, then when you come back next month, we'll bring it with you then as well.
Great. Thank you.
So I'm assuming you had your vaccine?
I did, I had both of them.
Oh, good. You did well?
I did, I was fine. I sort of had the man flu. Relax.
Sorry.
That's okay, it just makes my job
you
easier.
did great.
You won't be mad at me the next day. Relax.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was good. It didn't hurt at all. You were great. Very happy to be vaccinated. First dose down. So I'll get this one. Thank you so much.
How are you feeling?
Feeling well, thanks.
Excited a little bit?
I am excited, nervous, excited, a little bit of both.
What are you nervous
Getting a shot, one, and two, I just, it's anticipation too, like excitement about hopefully moving forward with everything in society.
Consent here for me that
Sure.
you're going to get the vaccine.
Sorry, I missed that.
That's okay.
I work with my father a lot, and he's going to be 79 this week, and he already registered to take it. He's a veteran, so he's going to take it in the VA in the next couple of weeks. And I feel really good about being able to see him and not worry about potentially bringing something to him, so I'm very excited about that. My wife will probably get the vaccine in February, and I know she's excited. And I work in a school system, and I work as a therapist in the community, and I'm in a lot of closed areas with students and patients, and I'm really excited just to hopefully one day not have a mask on when I'm interacting with them. So this is a step towards that.
Tell me about it.
Yep.
Me too.
Absolutely.
Thanks for helping us out.
Thank you. All right.
Which side, sir?
Left, please. Allergy shots as a kid, so I'm hoping the soreness doesn't go past that.
That's it.
Thank you.
Oh, you give an excellent shot. Oh my God.
Compliments all day.
She's the best.